added. I noticed it wasn't there, and I was there, please.
Okay, great. So if the minutes could be updated to reflect Mr. Malinowski's presence at that meeting.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Manning.
at the beginning of the minutes with regard to the election of the chair, item number 4,
Yes.
actually, after that motion, it was determined to, or it was suggested that the nomination be accepted by acclamation. And 2 of the 5 members representing 40% were not present. And as a result, I did not vote in favor of acclamation, but the minutes don't reflect that. And I'd like them to. And
Okay.
with that change, I'm ready to vote.
Great. Does that complete any additions or changes to the minutes? Okay. Hearing no further changes, I will call for the vote to approve the minutes.
Ratio.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Are you speaking to me, Chairwoman? I'm sorry.
Yes, Ms. Roberts, are you calling?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Teratio,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Newton. It passes.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item is item 3, the adoption of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda or adopt the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Manning.
Second.
Thank you. Who is that? Is that the Galaxy A20? Is that Miss Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda recommended? I will recognize myself and propose that we have an item for update to be added at the end. That could be item 6 and then make adjournment item 7. And I believe that item would be regarding the sewer service. Okay. It looks like Miss Newton is here and she's connecting to audio. Okay. I guess that fails for lack of a second.
I'll second. I apologize, man.
Okay. Okay. Great. So that item has been moved and seconded. And I will, are there any other changes recommended? Yes, Mr. Livingston.
What happened to that item, the motion regarding the affordable housing? Was that to be on this agenda, another agenda? What happened to that?
Yes, so Mr. Livingston, that would be, that item would have been too quick of a turnaround to get on this agenda. We had already set the agenda for this coming meeting beforehand.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Malinowski.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski.
You mentioned something about adding an item, and I was just wondering, you said an update on sewer service. Could I get a little more on what it is that you're adding, please?
Yes, I believe Miss Myers wanted to address us briefly, just as an update. And Miss Myers, are you on the phone?
I am. I forgot to unmute myself again.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just to let folks know that that project that the council voted for in the southeastern part of the county is rapidly underway to repair their schools. It's, our $35 million sewer and water system. And I was unaware, and certainly I live in the area, so I wanted to make sure that all council members were aware. It's a pretty amazing project. And so I just wanted the staff to bring everybody up to speed if folks were interested. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. That already came out of the full council. Why don't we put that in maybe under the chair's report at the next full council meeting?
Yeah. I would be, if Ms. Myers is okay with that, I would be happy to have a larger audience for that update next Tuesday.
Of course.
Okay,
Sure.
great. Thank you. Okay, so let's just leave the, we'll just leave the agenda as originally presented to us. I'll have Ms. Roberts call for the vote on the agenda.
Horatio,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
passes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm looking at the gallery view, so I can't see who has their hand up. I have been notified that Mr. Manning has his hand up.
That was before, and I got,
Okay.
well, I don't know that I got recognized, but I talked. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next item is item 4, items for action. The first is letter A, fiber joint trench during Southeast Sewer Project. That can be found on pages 8 through 18 of our agenda. This was originally presented to us with a recommended staff recommendation or to not approve it. However, we do have an updated recommendation from staff. Mr. Brown, do you want to have someone give us information about that?
Absolutely. So Dr. Thompson, ACA Thompson, has been working with his team on this particular project. So if it please the chair, I'm going to have him speak to this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So as Chairperson Terracio just alluded to, on this particular item, you had that briefing document. That briefing document only points you to a point of time. And as you see on that document, it states the date of February 19th when the staff developed this briefing document. Since February 19th, a big issue that we all face here in the Midlands, as well as those around the country and the world for that matter, is COVID-19. And with COVID-19, it has changed the way we do business. It has altered our activities of daily living. With some information that we received on last week from the state superintendent of education, we understand that there is a digital.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Manning, is there a reason you're interrupting?
Yes, ma'am, there is. So it says that this was the date prepared, as Dr. Thompson has said, is February 19th, 2020. But it's being reviewed by finance on the 16th and budget review on the 17th and legal review on the 18th. So what we're getting now sounds like it's not gone back through, so we don't have the benefit on this document of knowing a finance, a budget, or a legal review. Is that correct?
Dr.
Kennedy.
Thompson, would you like to-
Mr. Manning, if I can answer your question, sir. So the information in here, the financials in here do not change. What changed for staff is the determination that when we put this forth, it was trying to make the case for a.
I wanted her to see her friend, but he gone now. There's a child.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, Dr. Thompson. Yes, please continue.
I'm sorry. We were attempting to make a business case for burying conduits and fiber optic lines in the southeast portion of the county. So as I was mentioning a moment ago, based on information we received from the State Superintendent of Education last week about the digital divide in South Carolina, and with a good conversation I had with the Executive Director for Information Technology for Richland School District 1, who informed me that many families in the southeast portion of the county receive hotspots from the local cell phone providers. However, those students weren't able to use those hotspots because of the poor cell phone signals or the cell signals in that area. Moreover, as we understand that many folks in the area are battling chronic diseases, and they have different doctor's appointments and healthcare provider appointments. And now more than ever, telemedicine has become so important. And because of that, if they aren't able to have a reliable signal, cell signal, whatever the case may be, they aren't able to use telemedicine. Therefore, the exposure increases if they have to go to a doctor's appointment or go to the hospital to receive their services. And so because of that, the numbers don't change. Once again, you have numbers in here of the $1.7 million. If we were to bury the conduits, $2.8 million if we were to bury conduits and fiber optic lines. And so we understand that there is a huge need in the southeast portion of the county to be able to build out the infrastructure so folks in that area can have the necessary communications, especially the children and those who are battling different types of diseases and need telemedicine.
Thank you.
Those are my comments, Ms. Horacio.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Newton has her hand up. Are you?
I do, but I want to make sure with Mr. Manning done before I make my point.
Yeah, I think I got the answer was no. Thank you.
Okay. My point that I was going to make partially to Mr. Manning's question is that my understanding is that this matter is time sensitive, because if it's an action that council is going to take, it only makes sense to do it once the ground is open, and the ground is now open. Whether or not council decides to act on this is a different matter, but to suggest that we have a conversation about it today. Also, one of the other things that I think has changed since this original document was prepared is up to 75% reimbursement through the CARES Act, which is information that was not available before. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We haven't confirmed.
Thank you. Yes, was somebody trying to speak? Okay.
I just want to clarify. I want to clarify Ms. Councilperson Newton's position on that one. The information she just relayed, we have not confirmed about the reimbursement through the CARES Act. However, staff is still waiting on that information from our contractor.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question on that?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
That research that you're doing and the information that you're trying to get, is that information that would be available to us prior to next week's council meeting?
We anticipate that we should have that information. As soon as we are in receipt of that information, Councilperson Newton will be sure to share that information with you and the entire council.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Bill Malinowski.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to disagree with Dr. Thompson when he says that the financials don't change. The financials that were provided to us for this item do not include $1.7 million. And therefore, I think we need additional information as to where that 1.7 million is going to be coming from. Other than just to say it's coming out of this sewer budget, it may affect the actual monthly rates that are charged people. I don't know, but I think we need more specifics, just rather than just to say, well, because of A, B, and C, we need to invest another 1.7 million. You may only have 3 people down there that need such a service. I don't know this, And that's why I think that we need more information. And as Councilman Manning said, I would think that the budget review would have to be there for this additional amount. I would think the legal review also as to any type of anything we're opening ourselves up to by putting this fiber in the ground, and who's going to then maintain it or be responsible, because we were told in this agenda briefing that the main fiber people are not interested in it, or that they already have something. So I think we need more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. I believe we do have Mr. Smith on the phone. So Mr. Smith, could you speak to whether or not anything would change in terms of legal considerations? Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot and if you don't have an answer.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, I think that to Mr. Malinowski's point, if in fact there isn't any information regarding how this is going to be maintained, who's going to maintain it, then those are always questions that we need to make sure before the council makes a policy decision that we know the answer to those questions as we move forward. So that isn't clear from the briefing document at this point as to how that would operate.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I understand also we have on the line Mr. Jim Stritzinger. It would help me to learn more about this issue if we could hear from an expert in this matter. If it pleases the committee and staff, would like to ask him to just share his thoughts, especially about access for Lower Richland and those folks.
Ms. Teresa?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
I apologize. I absolutely want to hear from Mr. Stritzinger. It looks like Mr. Manning and Mr. Jackson have their hands raised, and so I just wanted to point that out. I'm not sure when they raised them, though.
Thank you. I have been.
And I'd like to say something also.
Sure. How about we go in order? I see. So Mr. Jackson has probably been waiting the longest. Could we start with you, Mr. Jackson, and then
Sure. Thank you. I wanted to simply echo what Mr. Malinowski and Mr. Manning said without being redundant, and also to simply add, in District 8 and 9, right now, we're going through a process. I know Mr. Manning is very familiar with it, and Ms. McBride is also involved in public utilities, where they are now proposing a rate hike, a significant rate hike for sewer services, and it has a number of people alarmed. And I think in part because some of the questions that are being raised today probably were not raised then and weren't answered. And so as a result of that, residents' sewer bills are going to jump up 60–70% if the requested rate hike gets approved by PSC. And so I would really caution us in this committee to proceed with tremendous caution to get those questions answered before we move forward and find out for our residents in the Lower Richland area a year, 18 months from now, that they've had a significant hike, unexpected significant hike in their rates. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Manning, do you still want to have your hand up?
No, Ms. Kennedy, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
I just want to agree with what Mr. Malinowski has said, and just to say that I need more information really about what's going on about this project, and that's all I have to say. I totally agree with what Mr. Manning and Mr. Malinowski has said.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or concerns from council members at this point?
This is Shakith Newton. Am I recognized?
Yes.
Briefly, I just wanted to echo that we absolutely need additional information. I would just ask if we can have this conversation today and hear from our expert. It may be a situation where we, like some of the things that we did at the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee meeting, may be able to send something to full council without a recommendation while we get additional information. The situation, I think, with this project, and again, council can decide not to do it, is that the economy of scale that you only get because the ground is open now. And so it's time sensitive, I guess, to say the least. So that might be an opportunity for us to have a discussion, forward it to council without a recommendation, depending on what we hear here, and then council can vote as it sees fit at the next meeting based on whether or not we have that information that's been requested.
Great.
I'm doing fine.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, with that, I would love to hear from our expert as well. Mr. Stritzinger, would you care to share with us what you might have to share with us?
Absolutely. Chairman or Chairwoman Taracio, thank you so much for inviting me. And Dr. Thompson was gracious enough to send me an invite. So members of council, it's an honor to be here. And I will also start off by saying, as a resident of Richland County, I'm happy to wish all of my neighbors safe. I hope everybody's family is doing well. Speaking specifically on the topic of getting fiber into Lower Richland County, as a resident of Richland County and an advocate of connecting everybody on the planet, I think it's never become more aware of how important it is to connect our residents to the internet. In light of COVID-19, it's become obvious that internet service is the platform and the foundation for economic development, healthcare, K-12 education, and just in general overall quality of life. Nationally, there is a best practice that has become known as a dig once policy. And it's something you all can easily Google and find lots of background on, but it's become public policy in a lot of communities where they've adopted the best practice that if you're going to, quite honestly, if you're going to dig up the road for projects like water and sewer, you might as well achieve some uplift in other areas of economic development at the same time. So in this case, Dr. Thompson made me aware of the water and sewer project in Lower Richland. Also, per my previous research, been working with Councilperson Dickerson over the years. We've been studying intimately in the number of disconnected residents in Richland County. Some of you may or may not know, but there's actually roughly 12,000 residents of Richland County that do not have access to the internet at home. I forget the exact number of households, but roughly 12,000 people. Those people live in predominantly two areas: the Monticello Road corridor, leading from Columbia International University up to Jenkinsville, and of course the Lower Richland area, where a huge number of families really heading down towards Congaree National Park really have no opportunity to bring internet into their family home. When I use the word access, this has nothing to do with affordability. Access means having access to physical infrastructure. Of course, affordability is a big part of the equation, but if you don't have access, you never have the choice to adopt technology in your family home. So there's two different words, access and adoption. Fiber is the way of the future. If we want to connect roughly 12,000 residents in Richland County, we have to have fiber in the main traffic corridors. The best and the cheapest time to do that is while the roads are open. And that can be done very efficiently and in partnership with others, hopefully very inexpensively. The road is already open. The project's already been approved. So there's two things that can be done. Number one is the installation of Conduit itself. Think of Conduit like a straw you put in the ground. Some of you are familiar with that. The Conduit facilitates inexpensive delivery of fiber later. It doesn't have to be done at the same time. Those are two separate decisions. The optimal thing that you can do while roads are open is put conduit in the ground, and then somebody else can come back in later and put fiber, or you could do them at the same time. I'm not familiar with the exact financials of this project, so I can't really speak to that. But nationally, it is absolutely a best practice to open the road one time, put conduit in. I know time is certainly of the essence with the Lower Richland project because the ground is currently open. So it's a matter of, thoughtful consideration right now. But I will say that if you can get fiber into the right places, that allows you to do two things. Number one is it allows you to provide for residential connectivity, which would be the ability to obviously connect individual households. But secondly, it provides the platform for improving cellular service. What a lot of people don't know is cellular service is delivered in a network of towers. At the base of every tower, you have to have fiber optic cable going to the tower or it doesn't work. So you need power and fiber at the base of every tower. That's what's known as backhaul in the industry. And certainly as a resident, I would love to, help our residents in Lower Richland County, get them connected. That area of the county's been neglected for many years. And if we could take advantage of the water and sewer project, drop some conduit in the ground, I think that would be amazing.
Thank you. And Mr. Trissinger, thank you for all that information. What I failed to do in the beginning was, you mentioned you're a resident, but I didn't get you to give your professional credentials. Could you share that with the group?
Sure. Absolutely. Yes, I'm a resident. I live in Forest Acres, and my private company is called Revolution D Incorporated, and my total specialty is the analysis of broadband deployment in the United States. I'm an expert on this topic, studying the Federal Communications Commission data, as well as I partner with a company called Ookla in Seattle, and we do internet speed testing. So I have mapped all 46 counties of the state of South Carolina and did that on a project for the South Carolina Hospital Association, as well as the Office of Rural Health, and also Palmetto Care Connections earlier, and recently got engaged by the South Carolina Telecommunications and Broadband Association to remap the state and document it as of 12/31/2019. So that project's well underway. I've been looking at this area for many years. Councilwoman Joyce Dickerson and I go back a number of years, and we worked with the CIO and have worked through and studied the problems and the challenges in Richland County for many years now. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Ratio, may I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Dickerson, please do.
And also, Jim, we have to also say now that Congressman Clyburn has gotten very engaged in these projects as well to make sure we expand it. And for God's sakes, I love Lower Richland, but I love the Northeast as well. So we need to work on both. All right. I think it's good to see you again.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes, ma'am. It is, yes, as Ms. Dickerson mentioned, Congressman Clyburn's been a huge ally on the mission, and I've actually presented a lot of my work to Congress, members of Congress, back in October. So this has been a passion of mine, and as a resident of Richland County, I certainly am rooting hard for our local residents to get a lot of good care and feeding.
Thank you. I see Mr. Manning has his hand up. Mr. Manning.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So since we've been working on this for a good number of years, I'm assuming the funds have been allocated in the budget for this year?
No, sir. No funds have been allocated as this item was brought forth to me by Councilwoman Myers.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought this was something that our experts been working with us for several years on.
Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manning.
Please explain.
Wait a minute. Well, let me clarify.
All right.
I brought this.
Myers, thank you.
Thank you. Just in the beginning, that was when the staff recommended not to do it. The COVID-19 obviously shifted the narrative, and rather than it being something nice to do, because of the disconnected students and the disconnected seniors, and the fact that the road is open and we might be able to get COVID-19 funding through the CARES Act, it came back around that way. So this isn't just me sort of sidestepping the process. I want that to be real clear. And Jim Stritzinger's been working on this for years before I was ever a council member. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. So Mr. Manning, your hand is still up. Are you finished?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe Ms. Newton is next.
I will yield to Mr. Malinowski first.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Malinowski?
No, go ahead. I'll wait. I'm not on the committee. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Stritzinger, the question that I'm going to ask you might not quite be in your expertise. And so if it is, you certainly feel free to acknowledge that. But we've all been seeing the digital divide exacerbated by COVID-19 and students who are trying to be educated, et cetera. And I understand what you are discussing in terms of the dig once. It makes sense. I think one of the things that might be helpful for the body, again, if you feel that it's in your area of expertise to address, is one of the things we're looking at is cost. We're looking at increased cost for the project. And so as you have looked at other municipalities, presuming you've seen some who have borne this cost of putting fiber in the line, how have you seen that shake out in terms of recouping the investment? Obviously, again, there's a public good that the counties are responsible for, but also in terms of economics and financing, can you give us a feel for some of the things that you've seen?
Sure. Without really speaking to this exact project, because I'm not familiar with the numbers, I think financially each project kind of comes together in different ways, with the cost sharing done differently in many ways. But I have worked most recently with Kershaw County directly and also Fairfield County directly to go after USDA grants. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is one of the primary providers of rural broadband subsidy around the United States. So there are different ways to create the financial synergy to make projects come to life. I think in this particular case, the first cost element that obviously needs to be looked at is the cost of the conduit itself and getting that in the ground and getting that as part of the project. But if that cost could be overcome and satisfied pretty quickly, I think it's probably the cheapest possible opportunity right now to get that conduit in the ground, and that will certainly hasten the delivery of fiber into Lower Richland County. So if it's at all possible to figure that out quickly, I think it would be a great thing, long-term gift for economic development, quality of life in Lower Richland. There's no question about it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. And understanding again that all municipalities are different and that they've handled this different ways. Just in your experience, have you seen an example of a county, a municipality that has installed the conduit first and then perhaps sold the fiber, or how has that worked? Because the USDA financing is something that would tend to happen on the front end, if I'm not mistaken. And we are now at the crux of the moment of deciding, again, understanding you haven't seen our numbers, just wondering what you may have seen in other places. Thank you.
Right. I don't have a specific project in mind, Councilwoman Newton, but I can certainly research that. This Dig Once strategy is a national strategy, so using those two words, you can easily document other case studies around the United States. And I will certainly look for exact opportunities and parallels that we could follow, but I don't have anything on my fingertips.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. I believe Mr. Malinowski has his hand up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, you just mentioned that you've worked with Kershaw and Fairfield counties recently, or maybe you still are. Do you receive some type of monetary remuneration for working with them?
Did I?
Yes.
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay.
Working with True Vista Corporation, yes.
Right. So you could stand to benefit monetarily if you were to assist Richland as well, or if we went forward with something like this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Okay. And I still have, and now this question, I guess you can answer it or somebody can answer it, but our briefing that we have in front of us says that when carriers, internet service providers were asked for feedback on something like this, they responded with no interest, and another one or two did not even respond, and two companies said they already have their fiber lines where the project is planned to go. Well, we're talking about for adding fiber. So why would we want to add even Conduit if companies, at least two companies already have their fibers there already?
Mr. Malinowski, I'm not familiar with those discussions to date. I was trying to read, I got the meeting, the draft meeting minutes right before this. You know, I'm wondering.
Jim, let me chime in. Mr. Malinowski's staff conducted this research, and these were the responses that we received in February. Now, I've just had a chance to connect with Jim on last week. I had a chance to connect with the school district executive director for IT on last week. And so when I say new development, everything I've learned has become new development as of last week.
Right.
That may be, but there's already two major companies, and I'll cite them because they're in our agenda briefing. It says Spectrum and AT&T already have their fiber lines where the project is planned to add fiber.
Miss Newton, may I do
there.
a point of clarification? Miss Newton,
Yeah, Mr. Dickerson, do you have a follow-up on Ms. Newton's
just a
question?
point of clarification. Mr. Manning made a very interesting point earlier when he said that we've been working on this for a long time, and those were those two entities that you mentioned. Those have been the obstacles that have prevented us from bringing broadband into the state of South Carolina, and we've been trying to figure out a way to get around that, and that has been a very difficult task because of those two companies that has prevented other people from coming, whereby we could have lowered the cost to get broadband to some of those areas for those people. That's my point.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dickerson.
Mr. Race?
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, are you finished with your question?
Yes, ma'am, for now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Myers, you're recognized.
I just want to add to what Ms. Dickerson is saying. I know that I guess those companies told our staff that they have fiber deployed in those areas. So that would be Southeast Richland County. I can guarantee you that if they have fiber deployed, the children and seniors who need high-speed internet access would have it. There is stranded fiber deployed in some places, but it's not anything approaching what you would need to have what we would call a real network. And the reason that I think that this is obviously urgent at this moment, and I think it's not just urgent for Southeast Richland County, I think it's urgent for all of Richland County, given that we have all of our students who are now literally working from home, many of them taking home packets of paper to do their work and not having Zoom classes because they can't have those classes. I think that in February, when we first talked about this, I agree that the financial constraints were different and it was a nice to do thing. At this point, I think that it's different. We're at a different moment, and we know that in September, most of us are if we're watching the developments on the news, know that COVID-19 will be back. If we have the opportunity now to shave off $10,000 from opening up the road to put in $1 million white tube that companies will come along and blow fiber in. And I know that Dr. Thompson said that he had conversations with companies who said they weren't interested. I will tell you that I have forwarded to Dr. Thompson, and he can verify this, information from companies who very well are interested and would be interested in buying it, so that the sunk cost for us is already in opening the road. We've already done that. And so the incremental cost, and I know that the staff is checking with Tetra Tech to see if this is a reimbursable up to 75%. I've read the CARES Act, and I read broadband as one of the things that you can get reimbursed for. I know I'm not Tetra Tech, but I can read the act. And I guess what I would say is I'd like us to think critically about not just Southeast Richland County, all of Richland County, and making internet access ubiquitous on high speed, not just this satellite stuff that drops off when it rains, or that you get when you get a great line of sight when the sun is shining at 70 degrees. I think that all the children across Richland County, and I agree with Ms. Dickerson, AT&T and Sprint, they've been barriers to getting this service because they want to have a monopoly on the hijack pricing services that they provide, that they're calling high-speed internet service that costs residents $150 a month, and they don't even get it when it rains because it's satellite-based. So I would just suggest that this is an opportunity, not an obstacle. The ground is open. We've already spent that money. And I would suggest that wherever we're opening the ground across Richland County, putting that white conduit in so that somebody else can come along and pay us to blow fiber is an opportunity, not an obstacle. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Myers, I still have a few hands up here. Mr. Manning?
Madam Chair, I move that we send this to full council without a recommendation through the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Mr. Manning, just to clarify your motion, is your motion to send this to from this committee to another committee?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard so much that we didn't prepare for this. We didn't plan for this. The COVID federal money is probably going to pay for this. Well, I mean, any time before, the appropriate motion would be to hold this in committee for more information.
Right.
However, I'm aware of the sensitivity of the time to this. But most everything I heard, the reason that this is unique is because of the whole COVID and school, how we do public schools changing, telehealth changed everything, funding going to be available, Tetra Tech, the experts will probably read, just like anybody apparently can read that. So I don't know why we got them, but that they're going to read that and see and make an official decision that funding is going. Well, so it seems like I'm pretty sure that the COVID task force is going to meet again before the council meets with everything, because they've been meeting every week before a council meeting. So it just seemed to me like send it through there because we don't have the funding. And when this went to finance for a recommendation, I mean, it's fine for somebody to tell me, oh, the finances haven't changed. But if I'm sitting in finance and you're sending me a recommendation from the administration saying, don't do it, that's pretty easy for me in finance to say, okay, I approve of this recommendation. And to say, oh, well, they're fine with it, even though it's not gone back there because the numbers haven't changed. Well, the recommendations changed. So I'm trying to not kill this today and put it off for a month in committee, but because everything I heard is through COVID. If that doesn't pass, then we can come back and I'll be happy to make the motion to keep it in committee pending appropriate routing and information with a different recommended, with a report done with updates that we route things and see what people have to say before the committee at that point.
Yeah.
That's my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. I will note that there was a little bit of glitch with your audio and video for a moment, but I think we got the gist of it. We do have Mr. Livingston with his hand up, who is our Mr. Livingston.
I'll be very brief because most of my questions were answered, and part of it was centered around some of Mr. Malinowski's questions. I need to know more about when Spectrum and AT&T say they already have fiber lines in the ground along where that sewer system is being built. I need to know specifically what they mean by that and so forth, and why folks aren't connected to it and so forth. And another question I had was, is the $1.7 million just for the conduit? It's not for the lines, anything of that nature?
That is correct, Mr. Livingston.
So we'd have no commitment. We would know. We have no idea what would happen with that conduit in terms of a company or anybody else at this particular point.
At this point, we can't give you an assessment on that because we have no commitment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just want some clarification on those things.
And Mr. Livingston, with Mr. Manning's motion, well, I guess we need to hear it. So this would go to full council on Tuesday? Is that your understanding?
Are you asking me that question?
Yes, I guess I am. You are both the chair of the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, this committee can forward what it needs for full council, yes.
Okay, but we can't forward this from our council, from our committee to another committee.
Now that's a question.
Chairwoman Taracio.
Yes.
Excuse me. I just wanted to add for members of council, I have recently completed maps of Richland County, very detailed, outlining where the people live that do not have internet connectivity at home, and it's very clear. You know, I'll share it generally. Lower Richland County is very, very behind in terms of internet capability, as is Monticello Road. But I will be happy to get those maps to everybody. I can work through Mr. Dickerson, and we can get those out to everybody so that you have a reference point to see. I think the visual of that really makes a big, big difference. And we can also overlay that with the water and sewer project, so you can see the proximity of the water and sewer project to where the humans live is a really, really big deal.
Thank you. I just want to be mindful of time.
Mr. Ratio, getting back to your question, there may have been a time when the committee have transferred something to another committee, but I better get legal to somebody to check that and whether or not that's in our rules or anything, though.
Okay.
Well, I was going to make a substitute motion.
Thank you.
But I certainly want to hear from you.
Yes. Mr. Livingston, did you complete your statement?
Thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
So we need a lot more information, and a lot of our council members have indicated that, and I agree with that. My substitute motion would be, given the time sensitivity, but understanding that we need more information, would be that we send this to council without a recommendation, with the stipulation that staff bring us back the additional information that we've requested.
Thank you. Is there a second? So Mr. Jackson seconded. It's been moved and properly seconded. This has had a good bit of discussion on it. Is there any further discussion? If not, I will call for the vote on this, on the secondary motion. Ms. Roberts.
Taracio?
Yes.
Kennedy? Manning?
No.
Jackson?
Yes.
Newton?
Yes.
It passes.
Okay, thank you. So that motion passes. In the interest of time, sorry, I'm going back to the agenda. Item B is approval to request funding for proposed turn lane on Highway 378 That's pages 19 through 23 in our agenda. I'll just ask staff, the recommended action is to approve this item. I'll entertain a motion to approve item 4B.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Manning.
for clarification, is this still staff's recommendation? Is there a new recommendation? Do we have any expert witnesses that have been invited to address this topic?
Mr. Manning, I've not been informed that there's been any change, unless staff has anything to update us on.
No, this is Stephen Staley here. No changes. Well, we did this, prepared this BD back in first part of March. The only change I would say is the transportation committee meeting we were shooting for was April the 28th. And that's today. So we're behind. We're not going to make that, but we'll try to get this on the June CTC committee and request the funds then.
Thank you, Mr. Staley. Is there a motion to?
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Newton.
I move to approve the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on this matter?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Bill Malinowski, I have my hand up.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, I see your hand.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification from Mr. Staley. I thought he said BD. Could he tell us what that stands for?
Oh, yes, sir. The briefing document, council's briefing document that we provide in that packet. It's just abbreviation for a briefing document.
Thank you. Also, I'm wondering, while we have all this wonderful language on why we should change it, do we have any crash data that's been provided to us? At least I haven't seen it in this briefing.
No, sir. This was something that was came about through our safety audit. Our risk management folks did a safety audit of the county, and this is one area that they pointed out that we needed to make some improvements to. Just getting in and out of that drop-off center is really dangerous. But no, as far as I haven't requested any crash data.
Well, I'd like to see that if you can get it, because anybody can say it's dangerous. And if you don't have one wreck there, then I would question how dangerous it really is. Also, have we advertised this particular project yet?
No, sir. We're requesting to request funding from the CTC first.
Okay, and now I go back to what I've said numerous times. We haven't advertised the project. I understand we're going to request funding from the CTC, but we've got figures that are in front of us here for what the cost would be. So does that mean that when the project is advertised, we just say, and you can't go over this dollar amount because that's all you're getting?
No, sir. Typically in the past, we've went back to the CTC if it went over, and they've provided us additional funding.
All right, it just still doesn't seem the proper way to do business, of showing what your hand is and then asking folks for that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
In the interest of time, I see Mr. Manning has his hand up. We have 3 minutes left before our colleagues need to move on to administration and finance. I would entertain, so Mr. Manning, unless you have something germane to add to this, I would ask.
A substitute motion be germane?
Oh, sure. If you have a substitute motion, please share it.
Thank you. So my substitute motion is that we send this item and item 4C to council without a recommendation and adjourn this meeting.
So that's 3 motions in one?
That's one motion with
one motion
parts.
for 3 with brief parts. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Ms. Kennedy, or sorry, Ms. Roberts, would you call for the vote?
Horatio,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.